Oh, someone just wrote in Q&A, we can see you and hear you.
Sorry.
Sorry, guys, we're just figuring out some technical issues that we've had like all day today. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, we'll start in just a minute, everyone. All right, I have no control over screen. Okay.
Okay, so Pamela Mounts is saying it shows that it is recording now.
Do you have control over screen?
Let me check. Not the arrows. Let me try again. Now I do. Yes.
All righty.
We are good to go. Thank you all for your patience.
Let me make sure everyone's admitted. Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience with our technical issues today. Welcome to today's Care Partner training at Insight Memory Care Center. My name is Kay, and I'm happy to be here as your MC. So
yes, and I am Laura Smothers-Chu. I am going to be giving the presentation today about understanding care options, but Kay is going to give a little intro first.
So if you're new to Insight, we're a nonprofit in Northern Virginia. Our mission is to provide specialized care, support, and education for individuals in all stages of memory or cognitive impairment, their care partners, and the community. Our vision is a community where those living with memory or cognitive impairment and their care partners can achieve the highest quality of life. So today's program, as Laura stated, is a guide to understanding care options with our wonderful guest speaker, Laura Smothers-Chu. And I'm going to pass it right on to you, Laura. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. So I would love to hear from you guys. So I know you've been writing in the Q&A a little bit. If you can enter in the chat, if you want to share your name, but more particularly where you're from, who you're taking care of, and if you live with the person that you're taking care of. I know that if you're going to an Insight Memory Care Center session, then likely you do have a forgetful person in your life. The person with dementia, I like to say that they're forgetful parent, they're forgetful person. It's just a more, I don't know, I think it's a nicer way of saying someone with dementia. So feel free to enter that in. I would love to learn more about you. And while you're doing that, I will talk about myself. So this is me. This picture is me with my dad. We are at my dad's 50th wedding anniversary with my mom. My dad is probably in around mid-stage dementia at this point. And it's one of my favorite pictures of me with him. So I am, let's see, we're getting some answers here. Oh, chat is disabled. Kay, do you mind enabling chat if that's possible? Awesome. Pamela is from Alexandria, Virginia. Her mother lives in St. Louis, Missouri. Ah, yes, long distance caregiver. I can definitely relate to that, and you'll find out why in a sec. Let's see. Sant Gupta is from Lorton, Virginia, caring for his wife with dementia. Darlene Jackson is from Washington, D.C., and she cares for her mother with Alzheimer's, who has been living with her since April 2019. So we have some people living with a forgetful person, and we have some people that are long distance. Lynn Paradas, hopefully I say your name right, I'm sorry. Lynn is caring for her husband, and she's heading into year number 6 with Lewy body dementia. Yes, that's a long journey. Nancy Ryder is from McLean, Virginia, and her partner was just diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. I've been there and I understand, and you are really doing a good job planning ahead and finding out what is in the long term now that with the mild cognitive impairment diagnosis. So that's great. We have someone from Lovettsville, Virginia. Her husband lives with her, has early onset Alzheimer's on year 4, and he is 59. So that, yes, early onset, unfortunately. And then we have Diane, who lives in Lorton, Virginia, with neighbors without family. Gotcha. Yep. So we have a really nice variety of people, mostly in the DC area, I believe, from what I'm seeing. But this video is going to be on YouTube, so anyone is welcome to watch it. And I will be talking about care options that are not only in DC, of course, but all over the country, and that's really important. So Paul is in Falls Church, caring for his partner of 16 years. They live together. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming today and being patient as we ironed out the things. Let me just, if you all can just help me out and check to see if the chat is enabled, that would be great, just in case we have anything else come up. I would greatly appreciate it if you guys can just check that and let me know in the Q&A if chat is enabled or if you can enter something in chat. Awesome. So as I am chat is still disabled. Thank you so much, Jeannie, for sharing. She's in Herndon, and she cares for her husband, Gary, age 65, with early onset. Okay. All right. Well, the good thing is that we don't need any more chat. So, oops. Sorry, I just lost you. So we're back. All right. So we don't need any more chat. We just need in Q&A, and we are going to, I don't know if Kay mentioned, but if you all can hold your questions until the end and just enter them into Q&A, she will read them to me afterwards. I have quite a bit of content to cover, and I want to make sure I get all of that covered for you all for your reference. And then you can write in the questions as we go along into the Q&A. Kay will ask me at the end. All right. Let's get started. So I am also the CEO and founder of Befriended Heart, LLC, where I actually specialize in helping long distance caregivers. But this presentation is for all dementia caregivers. And I'm going to move forward. Okay, here we go. So I mentioned that my dad had dementia. And I was a long distance daughter of dementia. What does that mean? So there's a lot of different definitions of long distance. I like to say that if you do not live with the person with dementia, you are long distance, because I believe that it's not a geographical location thing. It's an emotional disconnect thing, right? And I was about 3.5-hour drive from both my parents. My mom was the caregiving parent. My dad was the forgetful parent. And I'm an only child. So my mom was not able to accept my dad's diagnosis for the first 3 years. So it really fell on me. And I ended up going to a lot of presentations like this through Insight, right? So I was actually in the same seats that you are in now about 10 years ago, before Insight was even doing things virtually. So my hope for this presentation is to provide you with as much information as I was equipped with when my dad first had biocognitive impairment, and also to add on to that and to incorporate resources for you to make the best decision. The other thing that's really important to me as a professional in this field is providing the variety of options that are available, but also telling you what my recommendation is based on best practices and also my personal experience. So something that used to drive me crazy and still drives me crazy is, like, I'll sit in these presentations, you'll get all these options, and then your brain is exploding because you're like, I don't know which has the best memory care, right? So I'm going to tell you. My qualifications, just real quick, are not only have I been in this situation for 7 years, my dad had dementia, but I also got certified. So I have credentials. I'm certified senior advisor, which means I am certified to advise elders from retirement all the way through end of life. I am also certified to teach all about dementia. So that is what I'm doing in this sense about understanding care options. And let me move forward here. Okay, can you advance to the next slide for me? That would be great. Thank you. So today we're going to talk about what the heck are care options, right? I think that's sort of like this overall term that doesn't really tell you what it is. So that's what we'll talk about. And what I did was I split care options into sort of the options of staying home, because there are things you can do to stay home as long as possible. And there's also options that require moving. So that's going to include independent living, assisted living, nursing homes, memory care, all the different things that you hear about, but you don't really understand, like, what do they look like? What are the pros and cons? What's best for memory care, right? It's most important for us. Then we're going to talk about what is a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, and how does that compare to a non-CCRC, right? And the last thing I'll talk about, can we go back really quick? Is hospice. And so after talking about sort of the pros and cons of each and the details of each, we're going to do a cost comparison of all of them. And that's where I learned a lot when I was sitting in your shoes about 10 years ago. I'm also going to talk about what my recommendations are based on my personal experience, our dementia journey, as well as what I understand about what I'm learning and knowing about the dementia field now with my credentials and best practices. And then I'll have a thank you slide if you're interested in hearing more from me, and we'll do the Q&A. All right, Kate, if you can do next slide. Thanks so much. So what the heck are care options, right? So I like to think of care options as sort of like a choose your own adventure, in the sense of like, what is the most appropriate choice for me and my family? And this is going to be based on what the forgetful person is looking in, like wanting to do, move into, also what you're comfortable with. But I think that we come to this huge conflict, at least I did, with, between safety and independence, right? Because many people want to stay home for as long as possible, but that's only realistic if they're still safe, right? So it's really a balance of saying, okay, how long can we keep this person at home so they're comfortable? And then, when is a good time to move into a more safe place, right? The other thing that to really keep in mind is we tend to think about the forgetful person's care, but we don't think about the caregiver's care. So in my case, I knew that I was looking at, elder living options for my mom as well as my dad, right? Thinking way far in the future. And if you are taking care of your loved one with dementia, this is something you may want to or already have started thinking about, like, well, where am I going to live, right? So that's what I'm going to attempt to address today. So your care options are based on a lot of different questions, which is why it's so important to pick the right choice for your family. What are the safety issues at home? For example, is the forgetful person, opening the door and wandering out into the street, and then the police are bringing them back, right? It's probably needs to start looking into safety features, or if that's not working, and it's really a whole lot of emotional drain for you looking at a place for them to move, right? Is the person moving alone, or are you married to that person? Are your parents married to that person, right? There are places that, based on the care option, that, only have the person with dementia living by themselves, and the couple doesn't actually, the wife or the husband doesn't come with them, or the partner, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Does this person have a chronic or complex illness in addition to memory loss, right? Because that is going to need more intense care. And so you'll need a different care option for that type of illness. The question you may have heard about ADLs, right? How many activities of daily living can this person still do? So I like to think of this idea, not in the sense that elders are children at all, like children, but it helps us to understand what ADLs are, in the sense of when we teach children to take care of themselves as they're growing up, right? Brushing their teeth, dressing themselves, using a toilet, eating, right? All of these things are considered activities of daily living. And based on what activities of daily living that the forgetful person can still do, that is a better fit. For example, if your forgetful parent can no longer use the bathroom, they're going to need more nursing assistance than someone who can still use the bathroom, right? How much hands-on care do they need? Kind of speaking to the ADLs. Does this person have a pet? Some care options allow pets, some care options don't allow pets. So this is why it's so important to understand the priorities for the forgetful person and also for you, right, as a place where they can live. What type of environment do they want to live in, right? Is this person, introverted? Do they like to have their own privacy, or are they extroverted? Do they like to be surrounded by a lot of people? Do they like to go to dinner surrounded by their neighbors, right? What is affordable? Huge question, right? Let's be realistic. So you'll notice that the general theme for these care options is as care increases, help with activities of daily living, the price will increase, which makes sense because these places have to hire, a certain number of nurses, a certain number of doctors to be available 24 hours, and that is what you're paying for. And finally, the question of what even exists, right? What's available? So if you could go to the next slide. Awesome, thank you. So the options for staying home. I recommend this usually for early to mid-stage dementia, like the beginning of mid-stage dementia, when they're still okay staying home, but you need to look at, the safety measures. So like, are they still driving? Are they getting in accidents? Are they having trouble finding their keys? Things like that. So that's something you want to consider, and they might need assistance with transportation. There are some assisted livings that can offer, help with transportation, right? Other safety measures that you can incorporate before moving are home modifications. So most important is grab bars in the bathroom for them to be able to sit down on the toilet, to get back up, to get in the shower, all, really to just assist them in doing those things. Handrails on all the stairs is really ideal so they can help balance themselves better. And finally, lighting. So especially in hallways or when they need to get up and use the bathroom, being able to see where that is. So home modifications are really important. And what you're doing when you're putting in these home modifications is you're really trying to prevent falls. So I don't know if you've had experience with this before, but my dad fell a couple times, and because elders' bones are more brittle, they're going to break more easily. So he broke his tailbone, he broke his hip, right? So what we're trying to do is prevent those falls as much as possible for as long as possible. Then the last thing for safety measures is I've, worked with caregivers that have helped their parents put up signs or notes, where the bathroom is, or, what time we eat breakfast, things like that. There's also apps that can help with these types of reminders as well. And you guys are all familiar probably because you're going through Insight Memory Care Center for this training, but an adult day center is a good option as well if you are wanting to, have the person with dementia go somewhere during the day to be with people like them, right? A community. Insight Memory Care Center is a great place. Also, there is a program called PACE, which is available in most of the counties of the US, and I believe it's a state-run program. It's a program for all-inclusive care for the elderly. So definitely look into that. It's like a wraparound service for elders. I believe there is an income requirement and an eligibility process, but if you are interested, check that out. The last thing I wanted to tell you about is something called town squares. So if you Google dementia town square, you may be able to find one near you. And essentially what it is it's an adult day center, but it also incorporates like these ideas of reminiscence. So for example, one that I looked up had like a 50s, Ford car, right? Which I think my dad would have loved to see. And they have like a little restaurant where people eat their lunch, and it sort of feels like a little bit of more of a community. So that's something to look at too. Next slide. Thank you. Then if you are still needing assistance, but you think the person can still live at home safely, then I would definitely look into home care. So let's talk about the difference between home care and home health because they are often confused. And not only by us, but like the media and everyone that tells you. So let me tell you the difference. So home care is non-medical companionship. Sometimes it's referred to as homemaker services or Medicare and Medicaid like to call it custodial care. But really what it is the person is spending, the home care companion is spending a longer time with the person with dementia, and they're helping with those activities of daily living if that's needed. If not, they're, doing some fun games with the forgetful person, right? And just keeping them entertained while you can have a break. Whereas home health is really when a nurse comes in to give an injection for an illness that someone has, but that nurse doesn't tend to stay for an extended period of time. There's not really that companionship feeling. So the reason why you want to know the difference between home care and home health is because for home health, Medicare and Medicaid covers a lot of that cost. Medicaid, if you're eligible, of course, it can cover some of that cost. But home care, unfortunately, also known as custodial care, is not covered by Medicare at all. And I don't believe that Medicaid subsidizes it at all either, unfortunately. But I will say the pros of home care is that it provides a huge break for the caregiver. So I know when I was reading off the chat, I know there are several of you that are living with your forgetful partner. And you need a break sometimes, right? Like you need to get the groceries at the store. And it's so important to be able to remember your identity outside of caregiving, to be able to visit your friends, to be able to, because it really does make you a better caregiver. And, we talk about all the time in this field. I kind of roll my eyes when I hear about self-care because I think it's like, yeah, self-care is great, but how do I get self-care when no one is supporting me, right? Well, home care is a perfect way for you to be supported. You can also create meaningful relationships with the home care people that come in. Once you get a person that you really like, then, they're like a friend, right? They're a friend. And it will give you time to do activities that you enjoy and errands. And cons to home care. It is a process. It's a longer process. So there's a learning curve for everyone, not only for you, right? And how to teach someone what you've been doing for your forgetful partner or your forgetful parent for a long time, right? But also, the home care company is learning what your preferences are, right? The home care companion is learning like, okay, like what does your dad like to eat in the morning? I mean, everyone's different. Those preferences are all different. And it's so important to learn that, right? So being open to that process. You also need to find the right fit. So we're all human and so are your home care people, right? So, I remember we had one home care companion who was really great with my dad, but she would be late a lot, right? I mean, 5 minutes late. And that's something that's important to my mom. So she was like, no, I can't, let's look at another person, right? For you, 5 minutes late might not be a big deal if you're doing a great job with your parent or your forgetful partner. So these are all things to keep in mind and being open to that process. There's also going to be monitoring needed at first because you're really going to be teaching the home care companion how to best take care of your forgetful person, right? So, really checking to make sure that they're doing things correctly and stuff like that. But eventually you will create that trust and you'll be able to go out on errands and take a break. And it will be such a great peace of mind for you. And as I mentioned, with all of these things, right, because it's a process, it is a short-term stress. It is a short-term stress, but it's a huge long-term gain. And so what I will tell you is the reason I'm talking so much about home care is I used to be the director of the Home Care Association of America, which is here in DC. And we are the only association for home care companies that have stringent requirements in order to be in the association and be listed on our website. And these include, making sure that someone is always on call. If your home care person can't come, they will always send another person. The other amazing thing about this, which I can't stress enough, is that these are all listed as home care agencies. If you hire someone off of Google that is not with an agency, you are taking on a huge amount of risk because you have to be their employer. So you have to, if they fall on your property, they can sue you, all of these things, right? And if something was to happen, because people are human, right? Maybe a home care companion, steals something, God forbid, right? This does happen. Is being able to push charges and call an actual company that's not going to disappear the next day and tell them and, really get, compensation for that, right? So that's a lot harder to do if you are not working with an agency. So yes, the agencies are more expensive, but what you're paying for is, in my opinion, worth it, right? So all of those agencies are listed under this website, hcaoa.org, under Find a Provider. And I recommend kind of reading the introduction because it'll cover what our requirements are, or what the requirements for my job when I used to be there were and are. But you can put in your zip code and find a really good home care agency right near you or near your forgetful person. And I'm going to take a sip of water and then I will tell you a story about Paula. Okay. So Paula was the amazing home care companion for my dad. And we went through probably maybe like 4 or 5 people before we found Paula. But I have to tell you, I mean, Paula, my mom tells me now, she said, I was really resistant to getting home care in the beginning, but that was one of the best decisions we made on our dementia journey with Dad. And because it gave my mom a chance to leave the house. It gave my mom a chance to come back and be fully present, taking care of my dad. She was also able to create a friendship with Paula, right? So Paula, this is the amazing thing about her. So early on into my dad's diagnosis, he lost his chance. He lost his words, basically. And so he realized that he couldn't express himself the way he had always expressed himself. And he became quiet and he became depressed. And Paula got him out of his shell. Like, they were having fun. They were laughing, and me living 3.5 hours away, I was like, oh, finally, like, peace of mind. I know he's being taken care of and he's having fun. Right. So we had a wonderful experience with home care. As far as the cost, unfortunately, it's out of pocket. As I mentioned, Medicare does not help with this at all. Medicaid can help if you are in the eligible income bracket. And I want to tell you about genworth.com. This is a resource I'm going to talk about throughout this presentation because it will allow you to calculate your average cost of home care by zip code. And this is pretty amazing because you can not only put in your zip code, but you can put in 2 zip codes and compare the pricing, right? Which is really helpful. So, and that's the average cost, right? And it's based on the location. So next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, and so let's say we are at the point where we're like, oh, gosh, like my, forgetful parent is past, home care. They really need help. For, in the case of my dad, he was having a lot of bathroom issues, and my mom finally was like, okay, we can't do it anymore. So then we're looking into moving. So I recommend this, like mid to ideally mid-stage dementia. You definitely want to have them somewhere in late stage dementia, in my opinion. So underneath all of these is independent living. We'll talk about assisted living, nursing home, memory care, what's a CCRC versus not a CCRC, and hospice. What do these places look like? What are the pros and cons? What's my recommendation? And slide. Thank you. So we are going into independent living. So that is me with my mom on my wedding day. The reason I have my mom here is because she is currently living in independent living. So I'll tell you about what that looks like. So this can look like a cottage. It can look like an apartment. It can look like a townhome or a condo or a 55 plus community, which is where my mom lives, a retirement village, or co-housing, which is more popular in Europe, but there is some co-housing here in the US as well. The pros of independent living, and also before I go into that, independent living, I kind of like to think about as sort of what it looks like to live on your own after you finish college or, your schooling, right? Where like you sort of need to cook for yourself. You need to learn how to cook for yourself. You need to learn how to do laundry, right? All of these things. And that's really because you're living independently. So that's what this looks like. So pros are that you can maintain an active, healthy lifestyle. So this is especially for people who are healthy overall, right? They aren't forced to live in close quarters with residents. Like they're not forced to go to dinner with their neighbors every night, right? They're responsible for your own meals. So if the person is having trouble cooking themselves, this may not be a good option. The good thing is that pets are allowed. So I know pets is a huge thing for my mom, is a huge decision maker for her, right? So it may or may not be for you and your family. Cons, you do have to manage house repairs and, you may be harder to make friends because you're not surrounded by those people automatically. You have to be more intentional about, introducing yourself to your neighbors, right? There's no medication management. As we know, people with dementia do end up having trouble remembering to take their medicine, right? So there's going to be no assistance with this. There's no skilled nursing provided. So if something was, an accident was to happen or a nurse was needed, unfortunately, there's no skilled nursing in the building. There's no help with activities of daily living either. And so for that reason, I don't believe it's ideal for dementia care. And for the obvious reason, they don't have any memory care services either. So I don't recommend this for someone with dementia. And I will tell you about my mom's experience as well. So she was actually, when she moved closer to me, she was living in a CCRC, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it was driving her crazy because she had to like go to dinner with all these people that she didn't know, and she's more introverted. And she wasn't in the health situation that she needed to be, with a lot of skilled nursing staff. So she ended up moving to a 55 plus community here in Ashburn. And yeah, it's basically like she's living on her own and she's, making her own food and she really likes it. So, but as far as I know, she doesn't have any cognitive impairment or anything. So it is a good match for her. Unfortunately, the cost is out of pocket. It's kind of similar to like moving into any townhome or condo, right? You pay the HOA fee, you pay the rent or the mortgage or whatever. But neither Medicare nor Medicaid address this cost. Next slide. Oh. I think we might want to go forward. There's one, I think there might be one before that, assisted living. Oh. Yes, okay, perfect. So the moving option is assisted living. So what does this look like, right? I think a lot of us caregivers hear about assisted living. We're like, oh, that sounds good, right? Because there are some that have a memory care wing or a floor in the building. But I caution you about assisted living when you have someone with dementia, because assisted living does not specialize in dementia. I don't care what they tell you. We have a special wing, we have a special floor. No. Not in the US right now. You have to be a specific memory care building in order to provide the best quality memory care. That is my opinion based on, my personal experience, my professional experience, but take that as it is. So assisted living usually looks like an apartment or a room. There is usually skilled nursing. So there's one or more nurse on staff. There are some assisted livings that can help with medication management. Some may not be able to. So I would definitely, if you're looking into assisted living, ask them that question. then they may be able to help with activities of daily living, right? There may be someone that can come in and help brush the person's teeth, right? Or a visiting podiatrist. But some of them, assisted livings, don't have that service. So make sure you ask about that, right? The pros for assisted living are that couples can still stay together. So this is an exception to the rule, right? If you are a couple and you absolutely do not feel comfortable with the forgetful person living in a separate building, a memory care building, then assisted living might be an option, right? You are still going to need to be their memory caregiver though, right? Because there is not specialized memory care in assisted living in general. And then assisted living also looks like a home-like environment. There is housekeeping that's already provided. There are pets allowed, which may be really important to you or your family. You can cook or you can eat prepared meals. They usually have like a restaurant, in the bottom level that everyone can go to if they want to. It is a lot easier to socialize in assisted livings because you do go to dinner with everyone. You do see them in the elevator, more than independent living. There is, you don't have to do any home maintenance. You don't have to like change out the light bulb, right? The assisted living will do that. And also there are usually planned activities too that are like in the clubhouse, or it's a good way. It's another way to socialize with people like you. Cons: there is less privacy than independent living, right? Because you do go to dinner, you do check your mail, where everyone else does. And there may or may not be 24-hour medical care. Usually with assisted livings, it's not available for 24 hours at least. There will be a nurse on staff, but again, ask about this. There is a risk of abuse or neglect, especially if you are not the one that is with your, forgetful person all the time. There is a risk, right? Because it's not us, it's someone we don't know. You could have limited visitation times because it is a, facility, right? And they have different hours that they're open. So keeping in mind when you ask about the assisted living. And also, like I said, but I will emphasize again, assisted livings do not have good dementia care. And so I don't recommend it for dementia care if at all possible. The cost of assisted living is, again, out of pocket, but Medicaid can help if you are in the eligible income bracket. Finally, I will talk about genworth.com. Again, love this website. You are able to, again, calculate your average cost by zip code for assisted living. Cool. Next slide. I think, yeah, no, you're right. Yep, that's it. Yes, thank you. Okay, the next option is nursing home. So this can also be called a SNF or an LTC facility. So SNF is skilled nursing facility, and LTC is long-term care, right? So this is kind of what we all think of as like, oh gosh, it's the nursing home, you know what I mean? And people tend to try to avoid it, but it could be a good idea if your person with dementia also has some complex or chronic physical health needs where they're going to need a nurse by them for most of the time, right? So this usually looks like a room, single or shared. It feels more like a hospital than a home. So if you've had the experience, and hopefully you haven't, but if you've been on the dementia journey, it will likely happen, unfortunately, that your person with dementia will fall down. And then because elders have more frail bones, they usually break them. And so you're going to be at the hospital and then you're going to be at rehab, right? At least that was my experience. So to me, rehab looked a lot like what a nursing home looks like. It does feel more like a hospital. But it also has 24-hour care available by medical staff, right? There's always going to be a nurse. There's always going to be a doctor. And for that reason, it has the highest level of nursing provided for activities of daily living, also known as skilled nursing, right? So pros of nursing homes are, as I mentioned, if there's complex or chronic physical health needs, like diabetes or there's wound care, I mean, like you really need someone by your side all the time, nursing home might be a good idea. They provide housekeeping and laundry. They have prepared meals based on diet. There is no home maintenance or chores needed on the person with dementia. Tends to be a safer environment for falls than assisted living or memory care, because it is more of like a hospital-like environment. Cons of nursing home are that it does have the least amount of privacy. Again, think about a hospital, right? Especially if you have a shared room. There is a risk of abuse or neglect. We've read a lot of, unfortunately, media news stories about abuse and neglect happening in nursing homes, right? Again, because it's not us taking care of our loved ones. So you are signing up for a little bit of risk there, right? No pets are allowed at nursing homes. It is the most expensive option of all because they have all of the skilled nursing on staff as well as doctors, and that's what you're paying for. And again, I will say that it does not have good quality dementia care. If you are, I think it sucks to have to make this decision, but like if your loved one with dementia has a complex or chronic physical health need and they need that nurse by them all the time, and they also have memory care, you kind of got to consider like what is more urgent, unfortunately. So nursing homes in general are not ideal for dementia care because they don't have the specialization. So I will say again, the Medicare.gov Care Compare, you can compare the quality of nursing homes. This just came out, I believe, with the Affordable Care Act. They created this website, which is amazing because now you're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, right? So it's basically what these places have done to meet the requirements that the federal government has for nursing homes. And then it'll have some extra stuff in there too about, I believe it has a score too, which is great. Cost also out of pocket, but Medicaid can help if eligible. You're seeing a theme here. Unfortunately, Medicare does not cover this long-term care costs. And so I believe next month, if you're signed up, you will find out what the financial options are for long-term care. But going back to here, I will share again, genworth.com. You can calculate your average cost of the nursing homes by zip code. And I'll actually have a slide in a little bit where I'll show all of them compared to each other. Next slide. All right. And this is my dad checking out the memory care place for the first time. He was obviously having some fun. So what does memory care look like? If a place is specifically for memory care, they specialize in memory care. And that is what you want right now, at least as far as the healthcare industry is in the US, memory care buildings are the best to go by. So it's usually looks like kind of like a combination. I would say it looks sort of like an assisted living, but they have specialized specialty in memory care and only memory care, right? So it looks like assisted living in the sense of like, it is a room, it feels more home-like. There is skilled nursing available. There's some help with activities of daily living if needed. So there could, again, you got to ask the memory care themselves, right? They'll tell you what services are available, but asking them like, is there someone that can come in and brush my loved one's teeth, right? Because as you guys know, as caregivers, as the dementia progresses, our loved one with dementia will forget to brush her teeth, right? So it's nice to get some assistance with that. There was also, I know the memory care that we use, there was a visiting podiatrist. So they would, help cut my dad's nails and all of that stuff. So, and the last but not least, medication management. As you guys know, right? There's our loved ones are going to forget to take their pills and when to take the pills and, may take too many pills and all that stuff. So you don't have to worry about that in memory care because they are very good with medication management. Examples of memory cares that I feel the best about right now. Arding Courts. There are a few locations in the US. Anything by Artis, which is on this slide, ARTIS, I recommend. And there's also this idea of the Greenhouse Project. So these three places, I recommend them because they base their design of the building and their training on research. It is really the cutting edge research. I believe that they do the best memory care that's possible. It's still not like A+, but it's the best out of all the options. Pros for memory care is that, again, they specialize in dementia care. It does feel more like home. It's easier to socialize because you're doing all the activities with everyone else. And they are so good at creating a routine. So they'll have activities and exercise as part of the schedule. They will prepare the meals as well based on, and will incorporate dietary requirements. They also provide housekeeping and laundry. And as I mentioned, it's ideal for dementia care, but only if there are no other pressing chronic or complex health issues, right? So you're going to need to contact memory care and see if your loved one with dementia is a good fit for them. Cons: that unfortunately, as I mentioned, if you are the caregiver partner, unfortunately, you're not able to live with the person with dementia. So that is a downside for sure. I know that was hard for my mom. You also can't leave the property. So as we know, wandering can be an issue with people with dementia. So at my particular memory care place where I had my dad go, they had a courtyard in the middle of the building, right? So it was surrounded by the building, and people were allowed to go out, during the day whenever they wanted and be outside, which I thought was beautiful. But I also didn't have to worry about my dad like wandering off the property into the highway, right? And what else? There are limited visitation hours as well. So because it's a facility, right? I believe I was able to go in later at night, but nobody was at the desk and I just signed in and, in case there's an emergency. There are, as I mentioned, various dementia care models. I shared with you what I think the best ones are right now. And again, as always, there's a risk of abuse or neglect. So that's why it's so important, if you are moving your loved one with dementia into any of these places, you visit often and, monitor things, right? It's unfortunately they would have to do that. It really is. I mean, it breaks my heart, but that's the reality right now. So I mentioned that this is my dad. We had a wonderful experience with the memory care place that we chose. I did a ton of research, as you can probably imagine. But what I did was to introduce my dad, and this may help you all, is I actually had my dad stay with me for a week while he was in mid-stage dementia. And I mentioned I was 3.5 hours away. So we sort of did I called it dad week, and so I was able to see what my mom went through every day, taking care of my dad. I was able to have wonderful quality time with him. I was able to gauge where he was in the dementia stages and kind of what I needed to start planning for. And it was a wonderful time for me to introduce him to the memory care place that I was looking at, right? To see if he felt it was a good fit. And as you can tell from this picture, he definitely liked it. So that helped me start the conversation with my mom when she came back to, take him back home. And I said, hey, these are the things I'm noticing about dad's dementia progressing. What are you looking for in a place for him to move to? And so we started the conversation, right? And sometimes that conversation is hard to start, but that was my way of doing it with my mom. So the cost, as always, out of pocket, but Medicaid can help if you're in the eligible income bracket, and if the memory care accepts Medicaid as well. So you'll have any of these assisted living, nursing home, memory care. Basically, they also need to be accepting of Medicaid as well. Next slide. Awesome. Okay, so I touched a little bit on CCRC, but let's talk about it. So CCRC is Continuing Care Retirement Community. And basically what it is all the different options we just talked about, but all in one building, smushed together, right? And of course, if you're thinking about this, you're like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. That's exactly what I want, right? And that's what I was saying 10 years ago when I was sitting in your shoes and I heard this presentation. But I need to tell you that this is too good to be true right now. Because as I said, the rule of thumb is if you have a facility that is combining memory care with anything else, assisted living, independent living, they are not going to have the specialized memory care that you and your forgetful person need, unfortunately. So as I mentioned, pros of this are that everything's connected. It's only one move into one building, but of course you might need to move from independent living to assisted living to memory care, depending on what the progression is. And the cons is that dementia care is poor quality and it's not ideal for dementia care. The one time that you might want to consider this is like what my mom did. So as I mentioned, when she moved closer to me, we actually moved her into an independent living in a CCRC. Why did we do this? Because we knew my dad was going to be living by himself in memory care. And my mom had been planning to get knee surgery on both of her knees because she had arthritis. She had been wanting to do this for years, but finally, now that my dad was taken care of, she could look at her own health. So she moved into an independent living in this CCRC. And I'm so glad we did that because the first surgery went well. But then the second surgery, there was a complication. There was an infection. She needed that extra skilled nursing that usually is not available in an independent living, but it was available to her because she lived in a CCRC, right? And so they were able to help her and do the home health and do the home care. So we actually needed to pay for a home care companion separately. But anyway, that was actually, it made sense for that phase, right? But she ended up moving into a 55 plus community because she no longer needed that extra assistance, right? She was good after her surgeries. She was, doing well. She's more introverted. She didn't really like going to dinner with everybody. And they were all like 15 years older than she was, right? So she wasn't quite ready to move into a CCRC. So cost of the CCRC is again, same as the previous slides. You'll have a different cost based on which section of the CCRC you're moving into, whether that's independent living, assisted living, memory care. It is out of pocket, but Medicaid can help if you're in the eligible income bracket and they accept Medicaid. All right, next option. I'm sorry, next slide. The last thing, hospice is not normally what you would consider a care option, right? When we hear hospice, we just think immediately of death. But I want to caution you on that because hospice is one of the best things for people with dementia, in the sense that it's the only time where everyone comes together in the healthcare field and does what makes your person happy, right? Who doesn't want that? I wish that the way that we dealt with hospice and palliative care was extended to all of these areas of care, but unfortunately, we're not there yet. The other good thing about hospice is that this is the only thing that Medicare covers in Part A, okay? The other thing, let's see, that I love about hospice, and then I'll talk about what it looks like, is that there's support. And we always think about it as support for the forgetful person, for our forgetful partner, but it's also support for you because you are going through a grief process, right? This tends to be in the last stages of dementia. And there's a palliative care focus. What does that mean? And I know you guys will be talking about hospice in a couple of months with the next training, but really what it does is it focuses on, is this person happy, right? Are these medications really helping them, have an improved quality of life, or should we just get rid of them, right? So it really goes back to the main idea that this person is still this person, right? I mean, they still have a soul. We still need to take care of them, but not in the sense that the US throws pills at them and says, okay, this is going to solve it, right? It's more like they listen to music. It's really more about their quality of life, which is amazing. There's an eligibility process. So what I will say is, even if your loved one with dementia is in early stage, I know someone said in the chat that they're mild cognitive impairment, right? That's the way beginning. But I highly recommend that you look into the eligibility process for your state. And in general, it's usually the doctor has to give a prognosis of 6 months or less to live. And there usually needs to be something else in addition to dementia. If that person has fallen, they have broken bones, things like that. Again, it's going to be specific to your state, but I would just look that up and then kind of put that back in the back of your mind, right? Because the sooner you can get on hospice, the happier your family and your forgetful person will be. That's just from my experience. And so I will tell you that, let me talk about what it looks like. So hospice can occur anywhere. It can occur in your home, it can occur in the hospital, or if they ended up moving into independent living, assisted living, memory care, it can happen at any of these places. For us, hospice happened for my dad at his memory care. So a place he was already familiar with, and they already worked with a company that did a wonderful job. So there's also, for hospice, there's 24 care available. And what's super cool about this is that it's an interdisciplinary care team. What does that mean? It means that there's not just nurses, there's not just doctors, there's a chaplain, not only for them, but also for you as a family member, right? And even if you're not religious, it's helpful to talk out this stuff, right? Because we are going through grief at that point. And there's a couple of other really great professionals that you normally wouldn't have experience with earlier in this care journey until hospice. So it really is sort of this unsung, amazing, one of the amazing things that we have in our healthcare system. I have a lot of criticisms about what exists right now, but hospice is not one. So I highly recommend checking out Medicare.gov, their Care Compare. They'll, compare different hospices. There are, which surprised me, there are nonprofit hospices, there are for-profit hospices, there can be good for-profit hospices, right? So check out what the reviews are, the quality of the quality. The cost, as I mentioned, is that most of the expenses are covered by Medicare Part A. And some are covered by Medicaid if you're in the eligible income bracket. And next slide. Okay, here's the answer you guys all want to know. So the 2021 monthly cost comparison of care options. I got most of these numbers from genworth.com, cost of care survey. And so basically you'll see that home care is sort of on the home care and independent living are sort of on the more cheaper relatively side versus nursing home. And so you'll notice this trend of as the assistance, right, the hands-on assistance with activities of daily living increases, you need more nurses, more doctors, the cost is going to increase, right? So for home care, it's $5,300. By the way, this is for the DC area specifically. So if you are outside the DC area, I know most people that are watching this now are within DC, but if you are watching this outside the DC area, you're in a different state completely, you can still use genworth.com to estimate the cost. Independent living. So for independent living, Genworth does not have these costs. And so I really based it on my personal family experience in the DC area. And so you'll see that there's two sort of options for independent living. The first number is living in a condo or townhome outside the facility. That's basically like HOA fee, right? The rental or the mortgage, depending on where you're living, right? Townhouse or apartment and whether or not you own it. The second amount is if you're living inside a CCRC, like my mom first did, right? So even though she was in independent living, she was paying higher amount because of that access to the extra services, the extra nursing services if she needed them, right? And it made sense for us at the time. The assisted living, again, this comes from Genworth, is $5,948. And then memory care. Unfortunately, Genworth does not have memory care expenses, but again, I base this on my personal experience in the DC area, also knowing sort of best practices and what the field looks like here in the DC area in my field. But this is really based on adding 20 to 30% to the assisted living costs. That's a really good rule of thumb to have if you're sort of like, okay, I have no idea what memory care is in this area. But if you do have the assisted living figure, I would go ahead and add 20 to 30%, and that'll give you an idea of how much memory care will be. And last but not least, nursing home, right? That's the most expensive. It's basically like a hospital. You have the most, skilled nursing care needed there. It's going to be the most expensive. So the first number is a shared room estimate, and the second number is a private room. So of course the shared room is less expensive. And what I would also like to say about Genworth is that they also, like I mentioned, that you can compare costs like zip code to zip code. But what is super cool is that they project what future years costs are going to be. I mean, up to like 10 years from now, which is amazing. So if you are coming into this presentation, like super early on into diagnosis, you can already start looking all of that stuff up and start saving your finances, right? Or start thinking about like, what's my financial plan for this? Because this is way more expensive than I thought it would be. I know that's what I was thinking when I first sat in on this presentation as an attendee. Next slide. Awesome. So with all of that information, my recommendations for dementia care: if you are finding that you and your forgetful partner or your forgetful parent can still stay home safely, and you can start doing home modifications, you can make sure that they're not driving, things like that, then I highly recommend, especially, beginning of mid-stage dementia, it's probably a good idea to hire home care. Make sure you do it through an agency. Please do it through an agency. I can't tell you like how many horror stories I've heard from people who have not gone through an agency. So again, the website is HCAOA for Home Care Association of America.org, where you can put in your zip code, find a provider that's within our stringent requirements. Then if you are finding that you are going to need to move for safety reasons, that please prioritize quality dementia care. And if you ask assisted livings and be like, do you prioritize? Oh yes, of course we prioritize that. No. At this point in our healthcare system in the US, I can only really stand behind a place that is only memory care all the time. A building that is specific to memory care. And so again, consider choosing dedicated memory care versus assisted living or CCRC, if at all possible. Next slide. All right, well, that was a lot. I hope it was helpful. Again, I'm Laura Smothers-Chu. I am the CEO and founder of Befriended Heart. And I specialize in helping long distance caregivers navigate their parents' dementia. So if you aren't quite sure, I know I talked in the presentation about like, this is what I recommend for early stage dementia. This is what I recommend for mid-stage dementia. This is what I recommend for late stage dementia. If you're not sure where your forgetful person lies on that continuum, then definitely check out my free guide that I have on my website. It's at joyindementia.com. And it'll actually be a window that'll pop up really quick and say like, hey, do you want this free gift? And you'll be like, okay. And then it'll send you my guide about the 3 dementia stages. But not only do I talk about sort of the symptoms of the different stages and things you'll notice, but specifically as a long distance caregiver, what does this look like, right? What does this look like to your family? What does this look like to people outside? What are the best steps that you can take right now in this stage? So I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Laura, so much. That was a lot of great information. We do have some questions. I am especially interested in being able to find a medical advocate for my mother. Her current care manager doesn't do that and doesn't have any recommendations. I find there is a big difference in what is available and maybe even what it may be called. I hope you can offer some advice and insight. Thanks.
Yes, I'm trying to remember the name. I believe it's called, it's an ombudsman. So OMBUDSMAN. Yes. Most assisted livings, most memory care have an ombudsman, and I believe it is state provided. And I also think it's a volunteer position. But I've found that in my experience with ombudsmans, they do a wonderful job of being your liaison. And honestly, I'm really surprised that your care manager doesn't have anyone to recommend. I want to ask you if you found your care manager through Aging Life Care Association. I highly recommend finding a care manager through that website, because they do have to basically agree to specific ethics and things like that. They have requirements. Essentially, what I think is really cool is that they don't get a commission from the places that they recommend, like the, assisted living or the memory cares that they recommend. So you really know that they have your best interest at heart. So just want to check if you have that care manager from Aging Life Care Association, and if not, maybe looking into one from there. But I would say, I really wish that there were more medical advocates. We need so many more medical advocates. And honestly, in my experience, I ended up being that medical advocate, even with I'm not a nurse, right? I don't have any medical background, but knowing who to talk to. And so it was a combination of me and the Aging Life Care manager that I hired, that we worked together, and we were able to do that. But I'm so glad you're looking into that, because you are right. We really need a medical advocate.
Great.
Thank you for that question.
The next question is, have you found group homes set up for memory care?
Group homes, do you mean like a community, like a campus type thing? If you do mean that, then again, unfortunately, Europe is doing amazing things with that kind of thing, where they're basically, I kind of think of it as sort of like a college campus, where it feels so much more like an open community. I don't know much about group housing that's ideal for memory care at this point. Again, I would recommend basically going to the memory care buildings that I talked about. I'm trying to think, the memory care that we used, there were probably like 40 to 50 people that lived in there, and they kind of had different sections of the building based on kind of where that person was in the dementia progression, which I thought was really good. So you would have people that were like, a little bit like in mid-stage dementia, but earlier, in one section, and then you'd have later people, in a different section. But I don't know that I would call that group housing per se, because it is one building.
Right. And the next question is, can a camera installed in loved one's room be used for monitoring the care in local care center?
Wonderful question. I had this question myself too, and I think I would look into that, because you can get into a lot of hot water with these buildings. I would say, and honestly, I don't think I've looked into this specifically, because we were visiting so much, and I also had hired an Aging Life Care manager. So when I couldn't visit, she could visit my dad and know that things were okay. I would love to say that you could put a camera in there, but I don't think you can. I believe it's illegal. I believe it's not legal. So I would check into that. And if not, see if you can visit, in addition to other family members on a regular basis. One thing I didn't mention, so glad you asked this question. One thing I did not mention, which is so important. And I think it's because we maybe missed a slide, but no worries. One thing is that you need to visit them on a regular basis. If it's not you, it needs to be another family member or a friend or a church member, or any, if you have a religious institution that people know you're a forgetful one, have them visit. Why do I say this? Because it not only, of course, the person with dementia loves having your company, right? You get good quality time, but also from a medical standpoint, unfortunately, this is the case. The staff will take better care of your loved one with dementia if they know that you're visiting on a regular basis. Unfortunately, that's the reality, whether you're talking about memory care, whether you're talking about assisted living. So be sure that it's a place that not only your loved one likes, but that you like, so you visit.
Okay, and the next question is, do you find a good ratio between residents and nursing assistants in memory care units? When your dad required rehab after a fall, did staff in rehab address your dad's memory care satisfactorily?
Such a good question. I wish they did. I'll give you an honest answer. This is again like why I entered this profession, because I was like, people need to know the real answer to these questions, right? And I'm working on my own, so I can say whatever, right? But they didn't. So my dad actually, I mentioned to you, he was living in memory care, and then he fell and he broke his hip the first time. And then he went to the hospital, and then he went to rehab. And here's the thing, unfortunately, he went to rehab right around Christmas time. And so there were still people on staff, but they weren't like the best quality people on staff. And because it was a rehab / nursing home, they did not have specialty in memory care. And so I noticed like my dad was in a more depressed mood, or, people weren't visiting him as much, or he wasn't getting as much socialization. So I actually had just signed up to have a home care companion come in and check in on him, in addition to me. At the time, my mom was still trying to sell our house in Pennsylvania. But it was like right when I had hired that home care companion, my dad did better and he got out of rehab and back into memory care. But yeah, I mean, you are seeing this gap that we have in care, unfortunately. And so that's why I highly recommend, if you can find a good home care companion and you can afford it. It's expensive, right? It's really expensive, but our loved ones need to be recognized and need to be, have someone that understands dementia, right?
Okay, thank you for that. And the next question is, was hospice an option if it was felt that a person with dementia had more than 6 months to live?
That's a really good question. So again, it's going to depend on the state. It's going to depend on the doctor. So it's either going to be your forgetful person's regular doctor that they go to that can make the recommendation for hospice, or in our case, and in most cases, because falls happen often with dementia, it's usually the doctor in the hospital that will make the recommendation. And to be quite honest, I remember getting that recommendation. And he said, "Oh, I think, I recommend hospice. This is the second time my dad fell. He had already broken his hip and his tailbone." And I was just like, no, I know what that means. That means it's the end. Like, my dad's fine, but I'm so glad that doctor recommended hospice, and we started it, even though I didn't feel comfortable doing it, because we were able to be on hospice longer than most families are. And I didn't know what the beautiful thing was about hospice until I was in it. So that's why I'm trying to share it with you all. But yeah, again, it's going to depend on your state. I think there may be an exception if there's a lot of complex chronic illnesses going on in addition to dementia. But again, depends on your state, depends on what your doctor says.
Okay, we have a lot of questions. So
Oh, good. Okay.
I think closeness to where you live has proven to me as an important consideration in selecting memory care facility.
Yeah. Do you mean like where you live as a caregiver? Because so then you can visit. I'm going to assume that that's what that means. Yes. And having been a long distance caregiver myself, and I would still consider myself a long distance caregiver for my mom, even though she lives about 25 minutes away. Yeah. If you can, encourage your parents, or, to move closer to you, yes, that's ideal. But that's not always an option. So again, if that's not an option, so I work with many long distance caregivers. I highly recommend hiring an aging life care manager in the area of, where the person with dementia lives. So at least you have someone visiting on a regular basis, and you can get reports and you can know what's going on as well. But, of course you'll visit when you can, but in some places, people live a country away, or they live like a whole, plane flight away, right? So we need to be realistic with these things.
So the next question is, to piggyback on an earlier question, any recommendations on managing rehab after a total knee replacement? My mom really needs a TKR, and we're contemplating her having the surgery.
So this is outside my expertise, I will tell you. What I will say is advocate as much as you can. I will again point to what helped me in my situation, which was an aging life care manager. One amazing thing about the one that we hired is that she used to work in hospice and she also used to be a nurse. So she was able to know what the language was, right? And to get doctors' attention to be like, hey, this is a TKR, like, what are you doing? In a nice way, but in a way that I couldn't do as a family member. So I would say advocate as much as you can, yourself, and do the research yourself too, if you can, right? But try to talk to someone who is a nurse and see like what they would recommend, how they would recommend going about that with rehab. Because I'm not as familiar with working with rehab staff, since it was through an aging life care manager that I mostly worked with.
Did your dad get discharged from hospice when he recovered from fall and rehab?
Good question. I'm glad you asked this, because there's a common thought that if someone enters in hospice, they're going to die, right? Here's the amazing thing. This is how hospice is so amazing. You have people that graduate. So they're doing so well. They have so much focus on their care of, keeping them happy, that they actually get better, right? And they actually get out of hospice. So the downside is that Medicare no longer pays if you're not in hospice anymore. But the good side for you as a family member is like seeing like, oh, we have some more time left, So, so in my case, when my dad entered hospice, he only entered hospice after he had the second fall and he was in late stage dementia. But unfortunately, he didn't graduate. But I think that we got the best care that we could have. And I think it helped me to know that maybe my dad will do better in hospice, maybe I will have more time with him. So, and I don't think there's ever a downside to going into hospice.
Okay, and last question. Can you name useful apps for dementia around the house?
Ooh, good question. I think it depends on what your need is. So I have to tell you, being in the dementia field and as the only one that specializes in long distance caregiving, like in the US and from what I can tell in the world, I get a lot of companies asking me like, hey, can you try out my app? Things like that. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there have been a couple that I have heard about. So if you can do me a favor and email me at laura@joyindementia.com, we can talk some more and I can get that list for you, but I can't think of the ones off the top of my head right now.
Oh, I've been making a list.
Oh, good.
Just in case, because I know that was a pop question.
LSK, yeah.
The app CareZone allows you to upload medical files, advanced directives, scan pill bottles directly so you can keep track of everything. And it also allows you to share calendars and notes with all your caregivers. Also, everyone has the Note app on your phone that came with your phone on your iPhones. You can scan in your documents if you click on the little camera button. So you can scan in all your documents and name them and name the file that way. Also, you can track all your medications if you download the Walmart app, the CVS map, the Walgreens map, the app, and the Costco app. They all have the ability where you could not only order or reorder your prescriptions, but you could also track them, and it gives you also a history too.
Awesome.
MediSafe is another app for managing prescriptions, and eCare21 uses a fitness tracker to track heart rate, calorie intake, weight. So it's a good way to keep an eye on your loved one's health. And an app called Simple, SYMPLE, and that's a symptom tracker if your loved one is dealing with comorbidities, diabetes, hypertension, and all of that. So you can start tracking that, because I know it's sometimes hard to keep track of all of that and then explain it to their geriatric primary care person.
And then, sorry, Kate, can I just add?
No, go ahead.
The person that asked about TKR and rehab, I mean, that is so important to be tracking the symptoms that you can share with a medical professional and be like, this is why I'm concerned, right? Unfortunately, we need like specific evidence that we can point to in order to, really get the attention of medical professionals. Sorry, Kate, go ahead.
No, that was perfect. And also MindMate, which is a interactive app that is for your loved one. And it gives them like these fun brain puzzles and things like that. And it's for all levels of dementia. So if you're somewhere and they need to be distracted, or it's better than parking them in front of the TV, put this app on the phone or iPad and allow them to exercise their brain a little bit. And if you do a online search for apps for caregivers 2022, you will just get a whole bunch of lists. And what I like to do with my father is to go through them and see what applies to him and I and my mother, and we can try to kind of figure out what will work best. So if there's no other questions for Laura, we have maybe one more. Oh, someone would like to tell us that Life 360, another tracking app that the person she uses. Thank you for that. That's really great.
Thank you. I'm writing all these down. I did actually think of one as Kay was talking. I'm friends with the owner of the app, actually. It's called Care Trainer. It's Care Trainer, CARETRAINR. It's like missing the last E. What this does, so he actually started out as a home care companion, and he recognized that wouldn't it be great if there was an app that I could record a video of, here's where you find the towels, right? For the home care companion that they could watch. It's also a place where family members can talk to each other about how the person with dementia is doing. So yeah, if you are wanting to download that, let them know that I sent you. He's one of my friends.
Great, I will look into that. So thank you everyone for all of our being patient and understanding through all of our technical difficulties.
You guys have no idea, like, you know, there's so much stuff that went wrong. And also, you know, I was not able to move the slides forward. So, but Kay did that wonderfully. So thank you all for your patience. There was so many things that went wrong today, and I really appreciate your time and your questions. So thank you.
They were all great questions, and the only thing we can do is laugh when things go awry.
Well, we're used to it, right? Dementia journey. Right. We're improvising all the time, so.
That's true. So I wanted to thank Laura for all the time she shared with us and her expertise. Please feel free to get in touch with her. And I wanted to share some of the upcoming events. So next month's Care Partner training is How Will We Pay for Care? Financial Considerations on October 12th at the same time, 1 p.m. We have Memory Cafe on September 21st at 4 p.m. in our Fairfax location. The next Care Partner meetups is on Wednesday, September 28th, 10 a.m. at Ridgetop Coffee in Sterling. We're looking for item donations at our fall fundraising event, Paintings and Pairings, our annual event, which is October 13th. If you have a connection to a local business or a family member who has artwork they'd like to donate, please reach out to Amy. Her contact information is right up there. So, okay. These are just a few of the programs available to you at Insight. For more information, please visit our website at insightmcc.org. Also, there's a variety of ways you can support Insight as a nonprofit organization through monthly and vehicle donations, the Amazon Smile program, and workplace giving. And you can keep in touch with Insight through our various social media platforms. If Insight can be a resource to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're so glad that you were here with us today to learn more as a care partner. And thank you again, Laura, for being here and sharing your expertise. And thank you all to our care partners for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye, all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.